There are things in life that age well. Fine wines, fancy cheeses, share. And there are things in life that age less well. Milk, other types of fancy cheeses, or what was my favorite TV show as a child, The Bill Cosby Show, featuring noted pudding and roofie enthusiast Bill Cosby, which is problematic. But I'm not alone here. Half of the TV shows on air today are headed down that same train to problematic town, and nobody really cares. Take Dance Moms, a reality TV show centered around a kiddie dance troupe led by the Miss Trunchbull of reality television, aka Abby Lee Miller. Imagine Guantanamo Bay, but with less waterboarding and more leotards. It's cheap, it's exploitative, it once featured a toddler dancing on a stripper pole. And yet, according to 2017 Nielsen rating reports, it received millions of views every single week. It's exactly that success, fueled by the tears of young children, that speaks volumes about our culture. In his 2015 book, Trainwrecked, Wake Forest professor Eric Wilson posits that we are deadlocked in what he terms trainwreck syndrome, where our collective apathy turns compelling yet problematic behavior into a train wreck we simply can't look away from, until it becomes a Cosby-level crisis. We need to reevaluate the relationship we have with our guilty pleasures. So let's strap on our leotards and hope this oratory won't be regrettable in a few years. By first, understanding why we dance around solutions. Next, grandjeting our way to some hard impacts. And finally, implementing some kick-ball changes. Oh, okay, but reality TV isn't that bad. I mean, where else can you watch found footage of a drunk, bald Britney Spears cry singing Toxic in front of a cop car? Okay, so maybe reality TV is in fact that bad. So, why are we still watching? Everyone loves a good train wreck. Nobody's watching Dance Moms to see a 10-year-old land a pirouette. We watch to see Miss Miller scream things like, "Those legs are about as straight as Elton John." And University of Cambridge neurologist Rolene Coucher argues that this manifestation of trainwreck syndrome is downright biological. She explains that the breaking of minor social mores and expectations, think laughing at a slightly risque transition about the bald Britney Spears incident, is associated with a minor dopamine rush, causing us to interpret naughtiness as joy, guilt as pleasure, and problematic behavior as totally harmless. And what's worse, though guilty pleasures entertain us in the moment, they make us less empathetic long term. The simple act of indulging in our guilty pleasures makes us tacitly assume that there's nothing guilty about them in the first place. And thus, we begin to assume that when we commit minor sins, think littering, internet piracy, sharing a slightly racist coronavirus meme on Twitter, we assume that there are no victims. It's exactly this mindset that causes the Journal of Psychology on May of 2016 to posit that a lack of social responsibility, the feeling that our apathy may have direct social consequence, is both widespread and a major inhibitor to our ability to process conflict while empathizing with victims. Just like Britney Spears, we've overdosed on problematic behavior. To loosely quote noted philosopher King Jay-Z, we have 99 problems, but we aren't addressing any of them. In fact, y'all probably forgot that Jay-Z straight up went from stabbing a producer to marrying Beyonce. And if that's not crazy in love, I don't know what is. Trainwreck syndrome has symptoms beyond the record deals. For once, it leaves us lacking in personal agency. When we're faced with a problem that we can't immediately and personally solve, especially if it's inconveniencing, we cede all responsibility. If we can't fix it immediately, we assume it's unfixable. and thus we perpetuate large-scale societal problems by feeling unable to solve them. Perfect example, in 2010, New York Times revealed that Christian chicken organization Chick-fil-A routinely donates to anti-queer charities, who in turn use your chicken mini money to donate to causes that disenfranchise our 9 million LGBT-identifying Americans. So, we consumers were faced with a choice: ending homophobia in a minor yet tangible way, or chicken minis. Spoiler alert, chicken minis win! Hands down every single time, with revenue towards the chain even in predominantly queer spaces, increasing every year since 2012. It's laughable to think that that chicken just smacked too hard to stop, but it also demonstrates that when we can't personally and definitively solve a problem, we add fuel to the fire and choose chicken over lives. And this apathy not only ignores, but rewards the unethical. Another moment that aged badly for me: in the 7th grade, I decided to dress up as my favorite reality TV show host for Halloween: Donald Trump. I mean, the only thing I grabbed that night was candy, but still, problematic. And Mr. Trump is a perfect example of this phenomenon. His presidency has been marked by controversy after controversy, and yet none have definitively bogged him down. This is no accident. Chief strategist for Trump's 2016 election campaign, Ben Parscale, explains that Trump getting elected was an exercise in escalating controversy. This sounds counterintuitive, but in practice makes a lot of sense. Between Russian collusion, sex tapes, and candy grabbing, there were so many scandals that none were able to get individually and summatively addressed. And so we became apathetic towards all of them, feeling unable to solve, and thus viewing them less as a career-ending scandal, and now as a guilty pleasure, an electable one at that. Simply put, whether it's propping up the dance moms or Donald Trump, our apathy towards long-term problematic behavior simply allows bad actors to shift focus and Jay-Z level abuse to fly under the radar. Looking back to the Cosby Show, there's still a lot you can learn. The importance of friends, family, and guarding your drink at the bar. But I think the most important lesson is that when we allow seemingly small problems to fester, they turn into awful, childhood-ruining crises. So let's look for some solutions to our problem with finding and carrying out the solutions. Bill Cosby's legacy is so scary because he was Hollywood's guilty pleasure. For years, his abuse was propped up by an industry that refused to acknowledge it. And amongst Cosby's many victims, there exists a near consensus that the most traumatic part of their assault was its aftermath, in which one anonymous victim explains that Hollywood's willful ignorance made them powerless. It's heartbreaking to think that just one whistleblower could have exposed Cosby and yet nobody blew the whistle. And what's worse, we probably wouldn't blow that whistle either. Because we are so used to using our lack of institutional power as a means to deflect societal responsibility in a way that actively ignores the individual changes that we can make and continues to oppress the powerless. So be the whistleblower. Whether it's tuning away from dance moms, choosing Popeyes over Chick-fil-A, or voting in the 2020 general election, be willing to make small, minor, inconveniencing changes in your own lives to kickstart necessary social change. And that includes being skeptical about the media you consume. I mean, think back to my intro. I started this speech off by talking about a sexual harasser, a child abuser, and an overdose victim. Because that was the funnier intro. Because our neurobiology associates being risque with being comfortably entertaining, and no one wants to be the lame-o calling out an offensive oratory. But we all kind of have to be that lame-o. Because as we become more and more willing to call out and acknowledge the harmful content, practices, and institutionals we prop up in our lives, we're able to generate meaningful social change. one not-so-guilty pleasure at a time. This whole situation feels problematic. Crises are compelling, we are hard to motivate, and dance moments will never not be entertaining. But this has to be a train wreck that we are willing to put on the rails to success by acknowledging and becoming non-apathetic towards problem number one. All the problems themselves.